Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'm doing week 52 of my 2023 reads. To end the year, I had a really lovely reread, plus I got to two of my highest priority end of the year books, so I was very pleased. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I had a reread of Mammoths at the Gates by Nghi, which is the fourth book in the Singing Hills cycle that I read for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And then I reread it because I have read all of the books in the series to Sush, my husband. And so over the holidays, I got the chance to just kind of sit in front of the fire with him and read this out loud. It was so lovely upon reread. I have the same feelings that I did the first time around. So if you want to see, I'll link that week where I wrapped that up before. But it is just such a lovely installment. I love the way that Nghi talks about storytelling and what that means to people, and the arc of the stories in each of these novellas is so beautiful. So again, 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Kingdom of the Gods by N.K. Jemisin, which is the third book in the Inheritance trilogy. And this made me so happy to finish off this trilogy before the end of the year. Basically, in this third book, it continues off of the sort of characters, some of the characters that we'd seen in the first two books, but follows a pretty different perspective and follows about a couple of generations later on. So it's not direct, but because a lot of the gods are the same, they're still around. And this time we follow the perspective of one of the godlings, and it is a really interesting perspective. I loved the narrative voice of this character, and I loved just some of the kind of interactions that they have and the growth that they experience. So I thought that was really cool. I thought getting to explore this world from the perspective of a godling was really cool. I thought also just how it tied in just issues of family dynamics and harm and forgiveness, I thought was really interesting. And also just all of the political intrigue in this and issues of religion were fascinating. I think that the world building, the political intrigue, and the characters were really excellent. Just like the second book though, there's quite a bit of action in this, especially at the end. There's a lot of action and not as much trauma, so that was better, but still a bit more action than I like. And I just sort of wanted to sit in the moment a little bit more, and this kept moving us forward, and there kept being a lot of intense things that happened. But even so, I thought this was a really cool ending for the trilogy, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand by Samuel R. Delany. This is the last owned ebook that I had on my TBR, and I was so happy to get to it, but it was a little bit of a challenge. This is a book that I actually started a couple of years ago, and I got about 150 pages in, but it was dense and it was hard for me to follow. So I had to restart the book because I realized I just really had no idea what had happened. And this time, rereading that first part was actually really helpful. I got a better idea of what we were doing, and I got pretty engaged in the story, especially in the middle, but it was still a pretty slow going story. This is basically following the story of these two men, one of whom is kind of becomes a slave on his home world, which is then later destroyed. And the other man is sort of a diplomat across, takes place in space, it's a sci-fi. He's a diplomat, kind of goes to various worlds and connects with various people. And these two men end up getting connected with each other and kind of falling in love. So there's a really neat romance aspect of this, but it doesn't follow the beats of romance at all, except the sort of fated mates type of trope, which I thought was interesting. But the world building in this is really interesting. If you like some of those classic sci-fi authors like Ursula K. Le Guin, where they have this almost anthropological approach to exploring how different cultures can be, a lot of that is in this, but it gets so caught up in those details sometimes that you lose the characters, the plot, that kind of thing. And even for me, and I like slow and kind of exploratory stuff, it sometimes was quite slow, quite dense, and I was just like, what are we even doing here? So it was a little hard to get through. This was written in the 80s, and it has some really interesting explorations of gender and sexuality and societal structures, and I think that in that way, it's a really fascinating piece of history to look at, especially if you're interested in classic sci-fi and want to explore some of those ideas. it does very, very interesting things with them. But, you know, especially the ending was a little hard for me, and it just lost me. I don't think I quite understood what happened in the ending, which can happen in Delany books. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good reading experience, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that wraps up my reading year. As the last week in the year, I was very, very pleased to get to these last remaining ebooks on my own to TBR. That made me so, so happy. There were so many other books that I wanted to get to that I didn't have a chance to do, but I did get to play quite a bit of board games with Sush over the holidays, so that was also really fun. I hope that you guys had a lovely end to the year, that you got to read all the things you wanted to get to, and I'm really excited about the new year and all of the new reading plans that I have. So if you guys have read any of the books that I talked about today, or if you want to tell me how your end of the year reading went, I'd love to hear about it. Just leave me a comment down below.